Okay, so this is my week 3 video, and this is Molly. She's a miniature dachshund, and I found it fitting to include her in the video this week because, well, she's very calm right now too, so I thought it'd be cool to put her in my lap. And I just got done looking at the articles for from the ASPCA, what to do with your pet in the case of a disaster. I thought that list was very interesting and very thorough as to what to do with your pets according to shelter and what to do in case you have to evacuate. And she's watching Charlie right now. Alright, you can get down. Thank you. Okay, so I'll start off with important terms for this week. The term I found most important is vulnerability. So I'm looking at my notes here to making this video, so excuse me if I have to look down for a few minutes. Okay, the Cutter article says that vulnerability to hazards means a potential for loss. So I just found that interesting. I wanted to include that in my definition. So what I wrote down is vulnerability is the extent to which a person is likely to be affected by a disaster. And factors include race, class, or gender. And I also wrote a more specific definition. I said the rate at which someone is susceptible to a disaster. And then the factors, race, class, gender, kind of determine how likely or how much you will be affected by a disaster. Yeah. And muddiest point, the only really confusing thing I had with this week's material is where it said in the, I think the module introduction, it said vulnerabilities may be categorized as inequalities when it comes to class and race. I don't know, that kind of tripped me up a little bit because I don't think inequality is the right word to use. So I wrote down some other words I thought would be a better substitute for inequality. I wrote prejudiced, biased, or discriminatory, or discriminative. Never had to say it like that before, but those words I found more fitting than inequality, because the word inequality to me just doesn't sound fitting enough. It kind of tripped me up when I read it. And then, dogs. Sorry, the dogs are loose in the house right now. Okay, and class discussion. The question I wrote down is, of all the potential vulnerabilities, gender, race, age, or class, which one do you think is the most vulnerable, the most susceptible to a disaster? In my opinion, I think social class would be the most vulnerable, especially like, we'll say like lower class or working class, because if a disaster would happen, they don't have much money or valuables to fall back on. So if they're kind of forced out of their homes, then that's kind of, you know, that'll put them in the, we'll say like poor or homeless category, which is kind of what I talked about a little bit last week. I think race would be second to who's most vulnerable, because I still see racial, discrimination to this day. And it's interesting for me because most of my friends are of a different race. So it's kind of funny that, I still see discrimination happening when it's, Okay, I wrote down a few interesting points to kind of finish the video off here. From some of the articles we looked at this week, it says gender still impacts social life and has a part in our understanding of social processes. And that was from the Fothergill article. I don't know how to say the last name, but that's what I pulled from that. Because it's true, gender still impacts our social life. It shouldn't, but it does. And then another quote I wrote down is, disasters expose the inequalities that already exist in the societies they impact. Yeah, and that was from the Van Logan article. I just thought those quotes were very interesting and applied pretty well in trying to understand this week's material. So, these muddiest points. Okay, I think that's everything. So for this week, thank you guys, and let's see your videos, and I'll talk to you guys again next week.